So how did I end up escaping my parents' house that they locked me and my siblings in and taught us that the outside world was a threat and never allowed us to talk to anyone outside of the house, barely ever allowed us to leave the house? And to be honest, this part of the story is a little bit harder to tell because I got so lucky compared to my younger siblings in terms of timing and resources and the level of progression my parents were at in whatever you would call this situation. And the reason for that is my parents allowed me and my other sibling, who is also out with me, to attend a couple of community college classes in town in person, which was a huge shift from everything in the last couple of years. And they seem to have learned from that they made a mistake, and not that they made a mistake in if you control and monitor your adult children's every movement and treat them as a threat for having thoughts and opinions that are different than yours and guilt them for wanting to do anything outside of what you want them to do, that they will go no contact with you and they will want to have nothing to do with you. And instead of learning that, they learned if we allow any of them to ever leave for any reason, then we're going to lose control of the situation. And I think that's why I still have a 23-year-old sister, a 21-year-old brother, a 20-year-old sister, and an almost 18-year-old sister still in my parents' house, and they were never allowed the opportunities that me and my sibling had. So by the time I turned 18, I'd really settled into this third parent, emotional support daughter role to my 10 younger siblings. I had never driven a car, I had never had a job, still was not allowed to go anywhere or do anything. And I don't think my parents knew what to do with me as the oldest and the first person to reach this age. But kid number 11 was born right after I turned 18. So figuring out what to do with their first 18-year-old after years of holding us all captive, essentially, was not their number one priority. The baby was. And I continued to maintain that role I had and that responsibility I felt to stay there and help them with this new baby. So I did not start these community college classes until I turned 19. And that was a result of me really pushing on them and really insisting I need to be able to do something, and I can still help. I will come home after every class. I will still cook dinner for your kids every night. I will still make this look almost exactly the same as it looks now, but I need to be able to pursue something. And that was a result of what I was watching on these YouTube channels secretly about seeing these kids my age go and do these things, what I'd seen on TV, and then also that welfare check that was called when I was 18 was kind of an introduction to, oh, there are other people out there and this is not everything we've been told it was. So I went in fall of 2018 and took the GED test to get my GED because my parents in the state we were in, or the school I was applying for or something, you had to have a very structured record of your homeschool high school curriculum to get it to count for admission or to count as a high school equivalent. So I went and took my GED because we hadn't done any of that. It was very informal, especially for us older kids. We were homeschooled when we were younger, and then it was kind of all on our own. And then in spring of 2019, I attended my first college class in person. And I still didn't drive at this point, so my parents would pick me up and drop me off. They knew my class schedule. I was only allowed to be on campus for my classes, and then I needed to come home. And I was not allowed when I was at home to talk about anything I did outside of the house. Information was not allowed to get into their house about what was outside of the house. And I would get in trouble if I did mention it or bring it up or talk to my sister that I shared a room with about it. They did not like that. And it all went downhill fairly quickly from there because I took that first taste of freedom and ran with it. And the very first week, I remember having to call my mom to ask her if I could go bowling with these girls I had met, these classmates I had, and her freaking out about it, asking about who they were, needing basically like all the background information on why we would be bowling and how this would be an unsafe activity. And so I'm 19 at this point, and there was one full year where I was going to community college and still living at home, and my parents spent more time, it seemed, controlling and monitoring where I was and what I was doing at all times than they did raising their 10 other kids at home. But I had a phone so that they could communicate with me when they needed to pick me up and drop me off, because I didn't drive for like half of that year. And my mom would take that phone almost every day and go through it and see what I was doing and who I was talking to. And I was making friends and starting to really deconstruct my reality for so long by talking to those friends and the classes I was taking in college. It was so different than everything I had experienced up until that point. And while I was making friends and I would be allowed to go hang out with them once a week, I was allowed to go to do something with friends once a week, and I was allowed to go on one date a week. And so those 2 times I was allowed to leave the house every week. I had to send pictures every couple of hours to prove that I was where I said I was. But to follow that up, they would also kind of follow me around town to see if I was actually there or where I was or what I was doing. There was one time I remember when I was at the student union building on campus and not literally playing a card game. And I get all of these text after text after text from my parents. Why are you there? What are you doing? We're going to come in. And I was like, I'm at the student union building. I'm not doing anything wrong. And then I get another text, and it's from my dad, and it's a picture of the emergency room parking lot and him saying, you've sent your mom into a medical emergency. This is your fault. And I don't know if any of that was even real. They didn't actually go to the emergency room. But it was just like the level of like harassment that I was experiencing while I was still fortunate enough, like I do still feel lucky that I was allowed to leave the house at all at that point.